The alarms wailed through the thick concrete walls of Pelican Bay State Prison. Red lights flashed in every hallway. Guards shouted orders, but no one could hear over the noise. Somewhere deep inside the security housing unit, the SHU, a cell door was wide open, something that was never supposed to happen. A man stood in the middle of the corridor, his prison uniform soaked in sweat and blood. His name was Marcus Red Lewis, and he held a piece of sharpened metal in his hand, staring at something, or someone, lying still on the floor. "Don't move, Red! Drop it!" a guard yelled from the far end of the corridor. Red didn't listen. His eyes were locked on the body in front of him, another inmate, one of the most feared men in the prison. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the buzzing of the lights above. How did Red, a man who swore to keep his head down, end up here, standing over a body inside California's most notorious prison? And what secret had just been uncovered that could shake Pelican Bay to its core? Just 3 weeks earlier, Red Lewis had arrived at Pelican Bay. He was serving 25 years for armed robbery, but this prison wasn't like any other he had seen. The walls were gray and cold, and the guards didn't smile. Inmates barely spoke to one another unless they had to. Pelican Bay was built to break a man's spirit. And it worked. Red's first day inside the SHU was silent except for the sound of the heavy steel door closing behind him. His new cellmate, an older man named Thomas Doc Haynes, didn't look up from his book. "Rule number 1, Doc said without glancing up. Don't talk unless you have to. Rule number 2, never make promises. People disappear here for less." It didn't take long for Red to learn that Pelican Bay had its own system, a hidden world inside the walls. The Aryan Brotherhood ruled one side, the Mexican Mafia ruled another, and the Black Guerrilla family had their own corners. But beneath it all, there were whispers of something worse, something that wasn't about gangs at all. At night, Red could hear things, strange sounds, doors opening when no one should be moving, guards whispering to inmates in the dark. Once, he even thought he saw a light flicker in a hallway that was supposed to be sealed off years ago. Then one morning, Doc leaned close to him and whispered, "They're hiding something in the basement. Something not even the warden wants the state to find." Red didn't believe him. Not at first. But the next day, Doc was gone. His bed was empty, his books still there, his name scratched off the cell list like he had never existed. That night, Red couldn't sleep. He kept hearing footsteps outside his door. Slow, careful. Then, just before the lights went out, someone slid a folded note under his cell door. In shaky handwriting, it said, "Find cell block D. Midnight. The truth's there." Red's heart pounded as he stared at the note. Cell block D had been closed for 10 years after a deadly riot. No one went there anymore. No one could. And yet, someone was asking him to go. At exactly midnight, when the prison was dead quiet, Red stood at the edge of the dark hallway leading to cell block D. The warning signs were still up. No access. Restricted area. He took one last breath and stepped through the broken gate. The air smelled like rust and mold. His flashlight flickered. He heard a voice, faint, almost like a whisper, calling his name. "Red." Then came a sudden sound behind him, the sharp click of metal, and before he could turn, a strong hand grabbed his shoulder. The light went out. Red's flashlight hit the floor with a clang. The beam rolled wildly, flashing across cracked walls and old graffiti, then stopped on a pair of boots. The grip on his shoulder tightened. "Don't move," a deep voice whispered. It wasn't a guard's voice. It was lower, rougher, the kind of voice that had seen too much. Red froze. "Who are you?" he whispered. The man stepped into the light. He was older, with a scar running down his cheek and a shaved head covered in faded tattoos. "Name's Ranger," he said, "and if you want to stay alive, you need to leave. Now." Red frowned. "You're not supposed to be here. This block's closed." Ranger gave a short laugh. "Closed to them, not to us." Before Red could ask what that meant, Ranger motioned for him to follow. They slipped deeper into the abandoned cell block, their steps echoing softly. Every door they passed was rusted shut, except one, cell D13, which was slightly open. Inside was a small, empty room with only a cracked sink and a faint smell of bleach. But the floor had something odd, a square of newer concrete, lighter than the rest. Ranger kicked it twice, then crouched down and pried up a hidden metal plate beneath it. Red leaned closer. There was a tunnel underneath. "Who built this?" he whispered. Ranger's eyes darted around. "Not inmates, guards. Back in the early 90s, they were running something down here, experiments, trades, things that were never written in any report. People disappeared. You think that riot was about gangs? It wasn't. It was to cover this up." Red's stomach tightened. "Doc said something about this. He told me there was a secret in the basement." Ranger looked up sharply. "Doc's dead. You didn't hear that from me. Now get out of here before they find us." But before Red could move, the tunnel below them let out a faint hum, like machinery coming to life. A cold draft rush, das upward. Then a faint light flickered from deep inside the tunnel, and a shadow moved across it. Ranger cursed under his breath and grabbed Red's arm. "We're too late." The humming grew louder. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the hall. One Red recognized immediately. It was Officer Barnes, one of the guards who worked night duty. "Ranger!" he shouted. "You shouldn't have brought him here." The sound of boots filled the corridor. Flashlights swept the walls. Ranger's face went pale. "Run," he said. Red bolted down the hallway, his heart pounding. He could hear the guards behind him shouting, radios crackling. He reached the end of the corridor, but the old gate was locked tight. He turned around, and that's when he saw it. Ranger stood face to face with Officer Barnes. The guard wasn't holding a baton or a gun. He had a syringe. "What is that?" Ranger shouted. Barnes smiled coldly. "Insurance." He plunged the syringe into Ranger's neck. Ranger's eyes widened in shock. He stumbled backward, grabbing the wall for balance. "Red, get out!" he gasped, before collapsing to the floor. Red ran toward him, but before he could reach him, the guards tackled him to the ground. The flashlight beam spun, catching one last glimpse of Ranger's body twitching, his eyes rolling back. Barnes leaned down close to Red's ear. "You should have stayed in your cell," he whispered. "Now you know too much." Red struggled against the guards, his voice breaking. "What are you hiding down there?" Barnes didn't answer. He just turned to the others. "Take him to isolation. He doesn't exist anymore." The guards dragged Red away as Ranger's body went still. As they pulled him through the corridor, he caught a glimpse of cell D13 again. The light inside the tunnel was still flickering, brighter now. And just before they turned the corner, Red swore he heard something moving inside the tunnel. Something alive. Then everything went black. Red woke up to the sound of dripping water and the sting of cold metal beneath him. His shoulder burned and his wrists were bound tight. The last thing he remembered was falling, a hard, endless drop through the cracked floor of Pelican Bay's basement. He blinked through the darkness. The air was damp, heavy, and smelled of rust and old blood. Dim red emergency lights blinked above him, and somewhere in the distance he could still hear alarms echoing faintly. "Where am I?" he whispered. A voice answered from the shadows. "You're where they said no one ever comes back from." Red froze. The voice was weak but familiar. It was Doc. He stepped forward slowly, limping, his face pale and tired. "Told you not to come here," Doc said, coughing. "You had a chance to walk away." "Doc, they said you were dead," Red said, eyes wide. Doc gave a sad laugh. "Down here, death's just another name. They've been using us, testing on us, trying to make something stronger than fear." Red shook his head, confused. "Testing what?" Before Doc could answer, a light flickered deeper in the tunnel, white and flickering, like a broken bulb. Then came a metallic hiss, followed by footsteps. Barnes appeared, his uniform torn and blood-stained, gun in hand. "I warned you, Red," Barnes growled. "This place was built for monsters, and now you've opened the door." He pointed his gun, but before he could fire, the ground beneath them rumbled again. A deep, bone-shaking sound echoed through the tunnels, like metal grinding against stone. Doc shouted, "It's coming!" From the darkness, a shape began to emerge, massive, human-like, but twisted. It wasn't a creature from nightmares. It was a man, one of the inmates from the experiments, skin pale and veined, eyes glowing faintly blue. He moved like a machine, his breath heavy and ragged. Barnes fired 3 shots. The bullets hit, but he thing didn't fall. It turned its head toward the sound, then rushed forward, grabbing Barnes by the throat and slamming him against the wall. Barnes gasped. "You were supposed to be under control." The creature leaned close, its voice low and echoing. "We're never under control." It crushed Barnes's neck with a sickening crack. His body fell limp to the floor. Red and Doc backed away as the tunnel shook again. More glass broke, more lights flickered on, and Red saw dozens of shapes moving behind the walls. Other patients. The failed experiments. They were all waking up. Doc grabbed Red's arm. "We need to go, now." They ran down the tunnel, passing broken lab doors and smashed monitors. Sirens blared overhead and water started pouring from cracked pipes. They reached a ladder leading upward, marked emergency exit. Red pushed Doc toward it. "Go first." Doc started climbing, but the ladder shook violently. One of the creatures grabbed Doc's leg, pulling him down. Red swung a loose pipe at the creature's hand, yelling, "Let him go!" The creature screamed and vanished back into the shadows. Doc gasped for breath. "You have to end it," he said. "They'll rebuild this place. You have to stop it for good." Red looked around and spotted a control panel nearby with a flashing red lever labeled Power Overload. He ran toward it, water splashing under his feet. "This'll blow the generators," Doc shouted. "You'll die down here." Red looked back at him and managed a small smile. "Someone's got to make sure no one else ends up like us." He pulled the lever. The lights went white-hot. The entire basement started to shake as sparks exploded from the walls. The roaring grew louder, almost deafening. Doc climbed through the hatch just before the tunnel erupted behind him in a flood of light and fire. Hours later, rescue teams arrived. Smoke still rose from the collapse at section of Pelican Bay. Reporters crowded the gates, shouting questions. The warden stood silently, his face pale. They said it was a gas leak, an accident. They said no inmates survived. But 2 weeks later, at a small diner outside Crescent City, a man with a faded scar on his shoulder and tired eyes paid for his coffee in silence. The waitress swore she saw him limping, muttering something under his breath, something that made her shiver. "They're still under the floor," he said, "waiting." And as he walked out into the fog, the news on the diner's TV changed to a breaking report. Unusual tremors detected beneath Pelican Bay State Prison. Officials deny any ongoing investigation. The screen flickered for just a second, and behind the reporter, the camera caught a flash of blue light pulsing under the cracked concrete. Then the feed cut out.